Hello, everyone. Because our crowd skews a little differently than I originally thought, those older members of the crowd, I'd love for you to listen to what I have to say as a way to sort of guide people that either your children or relatives that may be looking for a direction. When I tell people that I'm a sports photographer, I get asked the same questions over and over. What's the coolest event you've been to? What is that athlete really like? What's the best moment you've photographed? And no matter how I answer, and I do answer differently depending on the mood that I'm in, they always respond with, wow, you are so lucky. And I'm here to tell you today that it has nothing to do with luck and that you can decide your own future right now. And it was here at Friends Academy that I first heard the Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken. And this is something that I'm sure everyone here has seen or heard. It's the emo cousin's Facebook status. It's the colorful Pinterest pin that your girlfriend likes to point to. But at the end of his poem, he says the following, and I quote, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And we all come to forks in the road, and it's such a crucial point. And those decisions are really what I want to get to today. What I think Frost is getting at here is not only do you have to pick a path, but you have to commit to it. And so often you can choose something and say, I'm good, I'm going to skip it and go back and then do what you want. But you have to commit. And that's something I found in my life and in my career has made a huge difference. It's obviously not my intention to scare anyone today. I don't want to come up here and say that decisions are going to ruin your life. This is not an anti-drug PSA. But when I looked at how I got to where I am, there are a few key decisions that really, really changed it. And there are more abstract decisions too, the type of person you want to be, the type of friend you want to be, and you might not realize the effects of these decisions for weeks, months, years, but you have to know that down the road they're going to come back to you. So my journey began when I was about 11 or 12, and I found my dad's old camera in our house, and I loaded in a roll of film, yes, film, and I started shooting roll after roll, and I started shooting my friends skateboarding. And at the time, I was in my skater phase, and as I was discovering photography, I was also discovering that I never would be a good skateboarder, ever. Every weekend, my friends and I would get together, and it seemed like they learned 3 tricks, and I could barely make it around the driveway. So I started taking pictures and making videos of my friends skateboarding, and that's really where my current career came from. And it started innocent enough, and then I got more into it, and bless my parents, they fed into it as well. And at one point, if you had asked me what I wanted to do with my life, skateboard filmer would have been the answer. Not a job is one problem with that. And I've since, come a long way from that. But at age 12, I made this choice, and I made it with such devotion, and I put everything into it immediately. And, I'm not sitting here saying that everyone needs to decide what they're going to do at the age of 10 or 12 or even 20. But I committed to it, and I was down that road, and I'm still going down that road. So all I did was consume photography. I didn't discriminate. It could have been Annie Leibowitz's Vanity Fair portraits or the latest cover of Sports Illustrated, and I would memorize the credits of the photos. Everyone's like, oh, look at this picture. I said, yeah, but who took it? And I would study that, and I would look, and it was a little strange for a kid to do, but I did it. So 2 years later, 2 years after I'd gone down this photography road, I found myself at the US Open of Tennis in 2004. And I was suddenly sitting next to the people and the photographers whose names I'd memorized that were on the credits of these photos that I loved. And I'm sorry for the adults that don't get the reference, but I was still a kid that thought the first floor social space of Frost Hall was the coolest place to be. So this was a big step for me, but I somehow got up the courage to talk to a photographer named Al Bello. And Al is the chief photographer for North America for Getty Images. And Getty Images, for those who don't know, is the world's leading provider of imagery. As a premier wire service, they provide images to magazines and newspapers all over the world, and highly regarded as one of, if not the best at this. Think the Navy SEALs of photography. That's who we're talking about here. And I suddenly realized that I had to work at Getty Images. This was no longer a passion. This was no longer a hobby. This is what I wanted my life to be. And to this day, Al is still a great, great friend and mentor to me. And I bet if I picked up the phone right now in the middle of the speech, he'd probably pick it up and we'd start talking. But this was a turning point. This was where I realized that maybe it's possible. And I'm pretty sure that, talk about the road less traveled. When I first brought this up, I think my mom probably fainted. But this was it, I decided that this was what I was going to dedicate my life to at the age of 14, God willing. And so during my time at Friends Academy, I was the editor-in-chief of the yearbook. I was the photo editor of the newspaper. I shot everything around campus. I was catching up with some teachers today, and they all said, oh, are you still doing the photography thing? Yes, I am. And I was doing it in middle school here, honestly. Even when I got injured in lacrosse, I shot my own team. And the whole while, I was seeking the advice of photographers I'd met, Al Bello included, other Getty Images photographers. And that is such a difficult thing to do, to seek critique about your own work. Because if it's coming from someone that truly cares about you and wants you to be better, it is going to be brutal. And it was for me. There was a lot of moments where I thought, well, I sent Al 20 pictures, and 2 of them he thought were okay, and the rest were all garbage. So it's really hard. And for anyone in our artistic pursuit, even in a non-artistic pursuit, feedback is so important. You have to seek it, you have to embrace it, and you have to put it into action. And that's the only way you'll get better. And at this point, it seems like I've made these decisions, and I'm 14, and I'm so young, but I decide what I want to do. Well, nothing could have prepared me for one decision that came towards the end of high school. And I think we all know what I'm talking about. College. I'm sure some of our audience is going through it today. And no matter how sure you are about where you want to go, this is one of the worst processes you can go through. And there's no way to sugarcoat it. So by April of my senior year of high school, I was between 4 colleges. Boston College, Richmond, Maryland, and Syracuse. And Maryland and Syracuse have 2 great journalism programs, 2 of the best in the country, as a matter of fact. Boston College and Richmond do not even have journalism programs, let alone anything to do with photojournalism. And so I met with a lot of photographers I knew, and I asked them what they thought, and some thought X school, some thought Y school, some thought, why do you even want to do photography as a career? So that kind of cued the existential crisis. And I said, is this what I want to do? Am I good enough? Can I do this? Is this a viable career? And at the age of 18, was I ready to commit my entire life to something by going to a school where that's all I would do? So I chose Boston College, and this is a school with no journalism program, no photojournalism classes, but it had a few things that really worked in my favor. And they were things that I wanted out of a university, but not that I wanted out of a place to learn photography. So it was Division I athletics, an award-winning student newspaper, and ties to a metropolitan city. And so if I wanted to shoot sports professionally, the opportunity was there. I didn't have to take it, but I arrived in Chestnut Hill with the potential, at least, to realize my dreams if I so chose. The freedom, the availability of choice gave me some unbelievable focus on what I wanted to do. My 4 years there were spent mostly photographing events. I only went to 2 football games as a fan, which is very little. But I shot every game, every single one. Bowl games, hockey championships, some of the greatest rivalries in sports. And at the time, it couldn't have gotten better until it did. And in my junior year at Boston College, the New York Times contacted administration about having a student shoot an article, and they recommended me, which was the most flattering thing that could have happened, although it was an article about interview fashion, so nowhere near what I was capable of. We don't really dress up in the photo world. This is about as fancy as we get. And I wasn't interviewing for finance jobs, which is what I was shooting. So I spent hours and hours planning and drawing diagrams and staying up late, and the day comes, and it was pretty awful. Nothing went the way I wanted. The story ran and the pictures ran, but as a photographer, I was very disappointed, and I was very hard on myself. I didn't know, though, until months later, that when I took this assignment, I was entered into the Freelance system of the New York Times, which basically works by plugging in an address, and they come up with your contact info, and you call them. And I started getting calls for things, and it set me up for some of the biggest moments in my career, including a cover shoot with an Olympic open water swimmer. And to this day, the coolest thing I've ever done. And that happened solely because I didn't say no. And I kind of just decided to figure it out. And that was something that, is risky, but it was a calculated risk because I had to do it, right? So my time in college, obviously I grew a lot as a person and as a photographer. And I interned with the team photographer for the New York Mets in the summers. And I started freelancing for Getty Images when I was a senior. And that's sort of when my freelance career officially started. And that's something that's very complicated to explain to people, especially the parents of a soon-to-graduate senior, that you're going to be a freelance photographer. But it's a thing. And I can tell you that it taught me some of the best lessons that I could never learn anywhere else. It taught me about being a self-starter, and about marketing myself, and about being punctual, and about being a good communicator, and staying creative. Those are things that I really do believe I couldn't learn anywhere else. And so all of a sudden, I was 23, and I had realized my life goal. I was hired by Getty Images. And I'll never forget what that day was like, and it was so cool, and I figured, wow, this is all I've ever wanted, right, since I was 14. So that's not where the story ends, but it occurred to me that if that was where my speech ended, it would sound like I made every right decision and life was perfect and blah, blah, blah. It's not, I can assure you. But let me add that a few months before graduation from college, I really had no idea if it was going to work out. I wasn't shooting very much. I didn't work for the school newspaper anymore. Getty was once in a while. I applied to every single PR firm and ad agency in Boston and New York, and I got this many jobs, not even interviews. So it was really difficult. And if you go back to when I was 14, if I don't introduce myself to Al Bello, I don't get critiqued, I don't get better. Maybe I even stop then. I never meet the director of photography at Getty Images, Travis, who became my boss later on. And I probably fall into a job that I don't love. The reason people, I think, should say, oh, you're so lucky about my job is because I do what I've wanted to do since I was 12 years old. I do what I love. I do what I'm most passionate about. I do what I get up in the morning every day, and I do exactly what I want to do. So that's really cool. And so when people say you're lucky, that's really what they should mean, not that you get to be at an event or you take pictures. But that's really the value there. 2 years after joining the Getty family, I made the very difficult decision to leave for a job at Major League Baseball. Something that the 15-year-old version of myself would never understand, but the 25-year-old version of myself was able to make that decision a little more wisely and felt that it was necessary. And frankly, there are a lot of people that don't think that this was the right choice, my old boss among them. But 2 months into the job, we were at the World Series, and I was about to enter the locker room for the New York Mets right after they clinched their spot in the World Series. And if you'll remember, this is a team that I used to work for, so talk about things coming full circle. But I looked over, and I was about to walk into the locker room with a woman named Elsa. She goes by one name. She works for Getty Images, and she's been a mentor to me for a long time as well. We kind of looked at each other, and she just smiled. And I realized at that moment that if I hadn't taken the new job, I would never get that opportunity. And so my choice was affirmed, at least for a little while, that this was what I should be doing. This change, as it so often happens, usually comes from a difficult decision. And going over my story and working on this speech and talking to people, I realized that there were a few certain things that I thought others might find helpful. You have to have a direction. And as I said before, that doesn't mean knowing what you're going to do at the age of 10, 12, 15. But you need to be able to look down the path of the road and say, how is this going to affect me? Where is it going to take me? Why is it important? Furthermore, like many things in life, decisions should take time. You should talk to the people around you, talk to the people you trust, because you need to analyze, and you need to really think. And so often, Ajay and Lucky were talking about the instant economy and social capital. Well, I think part of making yourself valuable is being a good decision maker, and that ability applies to anything, but especially in your own life. And I was amazed throughout, as I thought back to how I got to where I am, that the amount that people will help you if you show passion towards something is incredible. I had people do things for me that I don't think they would have done for their own children. But they saw how much I cared and how much I wanted it, and that passion really translated into something, and now I have people, like I said, that I will never be able to repay them for what they did as mentors for me. And it's the sum of my decisions that got me to where I am. Not one here, there, the sum. And I really believe that, and for the parents there too, making decisions for your kids is so valuable. My parents sent me here. It's a great place. They let me skateboard around on the weekend. They let me, do photography until it really was a thing, and I'm so thankful for that. And you never know when something is going to come along and change your path. Today, tomorrow, next week, next month. So you always have to be ready. So after hearing all this, it's my hope that you will not only make decisions, but make them with gumption. I know deep down, you all have something you love to do, something that really gets you going. I hope no one smirks and mutters Netflix. But the thing that sparks your brain and gets you up in the morning, go for it unabashedly. Drive down that road less traveled like it's the Autobahn. Because if you do, you'll be very surprised where you end up. Thank you.